7 Sinister Secrets. Discover the terrifying truth of strangers haunting the walls. Rebecca sat on her couch, her heart hammering against her chest as the wind rattled the panes of her window. The lights flickered ominously. Liam was asleep in his room, his innocent dreams untouched by the mounting dread that gnawed at her every night. But outside, the shadows twisted and turned, whispering secrets that felt all too real. The Watchers, Liam had said, with wide eyes full of wonder, but to her, it was a warning, a sign of the encroaching terror. The new neighbors next door had moved in just weeks ago, shrouded in mystery. Their house loomed dark against the night sky, an aura of foreboding lurking in every corner. Rebecca shivered, recalling the stories that had spread like wildfire through Maplewood: unexplained disappearances, whisperings of darkness fueled by the very roots of the town itself. She brushed them off as local folklore, but the cloying fear crept into her mind like a fog. Every evening, she found herself glancing through the curtains, scanning the shadows. And when she peeked outside at the dusky edge of twilight, the street looked deserted, though not empty. She sensed them figures lurking just beyond her view. The hairs on her arms stood on end, and when she closed her eyes, she thought about those childhood tales of dark creatures that crawled from the depths of nightmares. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days rolled into restless nights, and the muffled sounds outside became a symphony of dread. She noticed the footprints in the dew by her porch, disparate patterns that ended abruptly, leaving her breathless with fear. Was someone watching her? She wrestled with her fears, focusing on her role as protector, but the walls felt thinner each night, like they were closing in, suffocating her. Then came the scratching. It started softly, a faint scrape against the wooden siding that made her blood run cold. She wanted to believe it was just the wind or an animal, but deep down, she knew better. Heart racing, she dashed to the window again, peering outside. The streetlights flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to warp and bend, and the Watchers were there. She could feel their eyes on her, every prickle of recognition sending chills racing down her spine. Then one night, panic exploded within her as she trudged through the darkness after a long shift at the hospital. The streets felt more sinister than ever. She stumbled upon a flickering glow through the curtains of her neighbor's house. A sinister allure tugged at her instincts. What lay beyond that threshold? She felt a magnetic pull, and in that moment, she realized escape may not be an option. The Watchers were getting closer, and the truth, whatever it was, beckoned just out of reach. As Rebecca held her breath, her phone buzzed with an alert, slicing through the tension, and that terrifying reality gripped her harder. The shadows danced closer, intertwining with her heartbeat, as she knew with sickening clarity, she was no longer simply watching, she was being watched. The phone's buzzing pierced the silence like a knife. Rebecca felt the cold sweat gather at her temples, her heart loud in her ears. It was just a notification, she told herself. But the shadows didn't care about her reasoning, they pulsed with a life of their own outside, a chilling reminder of her isolation. She fumbled for the screen, praying for something mundane, a text from her sister, an alert about a work email. Instead, she saw a blurry image attached, the edges dark to blend in with the night. Rebecca squinted, leaning closer to her phone. Her blood ran cold. It was a photo taken from across the street. Clicked at her home. The angle focused on Liam's bedroom, the curtains pulled wide as if inviting the darkness in. Instinctively, she fled from the window, her breath hitching painfully in her throat. Had someone taken this while she was out? Gripping the phone tightly, Rebecca scanned the room, the shadows elongating and multiplying around her. The vibrant colors of her living room dulled as if the light was seeping out, sucked into the abyss outside. For a moment, her mind dove into frantic images of the neighbors, their faces as blank as the deep end of a pool. She could not remember their names, only their stares, those unnerving eyes that seemed to watch her with unsettling interest. Just when she thought she might scream, a soft voice echoed from her son's room. "Mom." It was Liam's curious tone, untainted by the fear wrapping around her like a vice. But she couldn't respond. Her throat felt tight, her muscles refused to cooperate. How could she be a protector when she felt so defeated? Then, a knock at the door. It was faint but echoed in her mind like a thunderclap. She froze, her body torn between instinct and terror. Who could it be at this hour? The neighbors? Or something worse? The knock came again, louder this time, and the shadows outside shifted, coiling like snakes preparing to strike. "Mom! Can I get a glass of water?" Liam's voice bubbled with innocence, unaware of the rising storm beyond their walls. "Stay in your room," Rebecca called, trying to infuse her voice with authority. Each word a struggle. She edged toward the door, her pulse pounding in her ears. A weak light blinked through the peephole, a silhouette. She pressed her eye against the door, barely able to breathe, and caught a glimpse of a figure hunched, featureless in the dim glow. It felt wrong, like the very air had thickened with dread. As she jerked back from the door, a raspy whisper tangled in the wind seeped through the cracks. "Open the door." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. Rebecca stumbled back, fear knotting her stomach. Once again, she felt the glint of eyes watching, this time from every direction, crawling from the shadows around her home. No more hiding. It was time to confront whatever darkness staggered at her door. Mustering every ounce of strength, Rebecca turned to Liam's room. The moment she entered, she was met with an empty bed, Liam gone. Heart racing, panic erupted as scenes of dread flashed. What if he was taken? As she fumbled for her phone to call for help, a sudden chill swept through the room, and she spun around just in time to see the curtain rustle and bow as if something had passed hurriedly by, and in that instant, she knew, the watchers were more than just neighborhood myths. They were all too real, and they'd finally come for her. A bright flash illuminated the darkness, but the shadows merely absorbed the light, leaving behind questions that tangled in the air. Rebecca's breath quickened, and she asked aloud, "Where are you, Liam?" But as the shadows loomed larger, whispering her name with a sickening familiarity, the room whispered back, and the earth beneath her shifted with an impending dread. What had she really invited into her life? What had the watchers been waiting for? Rebecca's heart pounded in her ears as she stood still, the weight of dread pressing down on her chest. She could sense the chill of fear wrapping around her like a vice. Looking back toward the empty bed, she felt a hot rush of adrenaline. Liam was missing. That thought echoed relentlessly in her mind, ramping up her panic. She stepped cautiously toward the curtain, where she had seen movement moments before, each slow step amplified by the creaking floorboards beneath her feet. "Liam!" she called, her voice trembling slightly as it cut through the heavy silence. Hoping against hope, she expected him to bound in with innocent laughter. But all she heard was the low whisper of the shadows enveloping her, wrapping around her senses. Then, a strange sound came from the hallway, soft, barely there, like the shuffling of feet against the carpet. It wasn't just the sound of something, it was the absence of something she should have heard. No voice responding to her call, no footsteps echoing back. The silence had teeth. "Liam?" She tried again, her voice more desperate now. A sense of urgency took over as she stepped into the hallway, heart racing. The shadows shifted and warped, taking on grotesque shapes that danced in her periphery. She could no longer tell where the darkness ended and her fear began. The house felt alien, its once familiar corners transformed, creating an atmosphere thick with the scent of dread. She moved toward the stairs, however, something stopped her cold. A pulse beat in the air, unease swirling around her. Suddenly, an icy hand brushed her neck, and she whirled around. Nothing was there, only shadows slinking against the walls. Tears of frustration filled her eyes as she backed away, retreating from the nothingness that tormented her. Panic swept through her like poison. What if someone really was in the house? What if that image was meant to lure her out? Just then, she heard a soft giggle so faint it could have been a memory. It was unmistakably Liam. The sound tickled down her spine, mixing relief with terror. Was it real, or was she imagining it? Liam. She launched down the stairs and froze mid-step as the front door creaked open eerily on its own, the darkness beyond spilling in like ink. Something was waiting for her outside the door. She could feel it. A presence. A malevolence that tinged the air with danger. Liam. She shouted again, her voice cracking. The empty hall stretched before her like a dark tunnel, filled with unseen horrors. Clutching her phone as if it could ward off the darkness, she took a hesitating step out into the cold, her foot landing heavily on the porch. The air outside was thick, oppressive. Silence hung like a suffocating blanket. She scanned the yard and street, half expecting to see Liam standing there, innocent as ever. Instead, only shadows lingered in the corners of her vision. Rebecca, the whisper floated from the darkness, chilling her to the bone. It slithered through the air, weaving in and out of her thoughts. The word was familiar yet foreign, a ghost of her name reverberating in her soul. "Who is there?" she demanded, shaking, her eyes darting to each shadow as if it might pounce. Open the door came a voice, deeper and more sinister than before, ringing with malice. It promised something terrible, something unspeakable. Fear wrapped its fingers tightly around her throat as she turned to rush back inside, but the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening thud. She was locked out, at the mercy of whatever horrors lurked in the darkness. Her breath quickened, heart racing, as she slammed her palm against the door. She thought of Liam. Where was he? Did he hear her? And then she saw them, figures emerging from the night, their features obscured, all watching her, grinning in the periphery of her vision. The very air vibrated with malice. She was not alone. Forcing her feet to move, Rebecca sprinted around the house. She had to find him. There had to be a way to escape, to save her son. But as she turned the corner, a shadow detached itself from the darkness, blocking her way. It was tall and twisted, its form shifting unnaturally. "You've invited us in, Rebecca," it hissed, a horrible grin stretching across its featureless face. As terror surged through her, thoughts raced of hope, of despair, and finally, of assurance that the shadows were not done with her yet. What awaited her just beyond those dark corners? What did they promise? Rebecca's heart sank as dread wrapped around her like a shroud. She needed to know what awaited, and that meant stepping deeper into the shadows or losing everything. Rebecca stumbled back, her instinct screaming at her to run. The shadow stood before her, its form a grotesque parody of humanity. It twisted and squirmed, as though anticipating her every movement. "You shouldn't have looked for him," it taunted, voice dripping with malice. Her chest tightened, breath hitching, thoughts spiraling into darkness. Behind her, more figures emerged from the night, their eyes glinting with malevolence, all watching her with silent anticipation. "What do you want?" she cried out, her voice trembling as she clawed at the edges of courage. "Just to play," the shadow replied, stepping closer, the shadows around it shifting like smoke. "Come join us." Panic surged through her, electrifying her veins. She turned to run, darting toward the side of the house where the overgrown bushes might offer some cover. But the shadows followed, their laughter a chilling echo that surrounded her. "You can't escape, Rebecca. This is your home now." Pushing through the prickly branches, she stumbled into the darkness of the backyard. The trees loomed, branches like skeletal hands reaching out, trying to grab her. She felt their coldness wash over her, chilling her skin and making her shudder. "Liam!" she shouted again, the sound feeling like a last-ditch effort against the suffocating dread that clung to her. A glint caught her eye. There, at the far end of the yard, a faint light flickered from the cracked garden shed. Hope swelled in her chest for a brief moment. Could Liam be inside? She made a run for it, her feet pounding against the damp soil, the laughter of the shadows now distant behind her as she dove through the rickety door. Inside, it was dark and musty, barely illuminated by the slivers of moonlight that penetrated the gaps in the walls. Old gardening tools hung from the walls, rusting quietly, their familiarity bringing a wave of nostalgia that felt misplaced in such a moment. She fumbled for her phone, hoping the screen's glow would guide her. Liam. Her voice was hoarse, laced with urgency. Are you here? Silence engulfed her, thick and suffocating. She scanned the corners of the shed, but it was empty. The only sound was the rhythmic thumping of her heart, an unsettling reminder that time was running out. In her gut, something twisted painfully. She could feel eyes on her, even if they were gone. Suddenly, the door creaked behind her. Rebecca spun around, terror igniting in her chest. The shadows crowded at the entrance, drawn in like moths to a flame. Their silhouettes flickered against the dim light as they slowly moved closer, hunger glinting in their invisible eyes. Please don't. She begged, backing away until she hit the wall. The shed felt smaller, confined, as if the walls themselves were creeping in on her. Join us, they hissed in unison, the eerie sound intertwining with her fears. You will never leave again. Just then, a sound broke through the darkness, a faint voice, barely above a whisper, cutting through the laughter of the shadows. Mom. It was Liam. Liam. Where are you? She shouted, hope and dread twisting together. Help me, Mom. The plea struck her hard, igniting a fierce determination. Where are you? I'm coming. Behind you, came the voice, trembling with fear. Rebecca turned, and the shadows surged toward her as a lump of ice settled in her stomach. Run! She yelled, charging past them back into the night, guided only by her instincts and the ghostly call of her son that echoed through the chaos. But the figures reached out, their fingers brushing against her skin cold as death. Just as she thought she was free, dark hands scrabbled at her, pulling her back. She felt her body leave the ground, suspended between the warmth of life and the suffocating grasp of the shadows. Join us forever, they chanted, their voices like nails on a chalkboard, resonating in her mind. As it all closed in, one thought pierced through the haze: she had to find Liam, no matter the cost. But then the world began to slip away, the darkness swallowing her whole. What had she awakened in the depths of her home? And would she ever discover what truly happened to her son before it was too late? Rebecca gasped as she broke free, instinct driving her forward into the night. She raced through the backyard, stumbling through patches of dirt and debris that clawed at her feet. Her heart thundered like a violent storm in her chest, a primal rhythm urging her on. Liam, she called again, desperation twisting her voice into a plea. The echoed shadows lingered, but she couldn't look back. She needed to get away, she had to find her son. Panic surged hotter than before. The shed receded into the darkness behind her, a looming specter filled with malevolent whispers. Each step squelched in the damp earth, a reminder that the shadows were still following, still hungry. Then she heard it again, clearer this time, a child's voice, trembling but unmistakably familiar. Mom! Help me! Where are you, Liam? She shouted, pushing her legs to go faster. Over here. The voice was still faint, but it cut through her fear like a beacon. She dashed toward the source, the trees slashing at her skin like skeletal fingers grasping a last chance for life, but as she neared a cluster of ancient oaks, branches twisted grotesquely above her head. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick leaves, turning the air around her into a suffocating blackness. And then the laughter came again, bone-chilling, mocking laughter that carried through the air like a twisted melody. You can't get to him. A voice screeched from the shadows, sending shivers cascading up her spine. This is just the beginning. Rebecca whipped around, ready to confront whatever horror was waiting. But all she saw were those same figures from before, their smiles wide and mirthless, transforming into expressions of cruel delight. They moved with an eerie grace, seemingly toying with her fear. Let him go. She demanded, her voice cracking with disbelief and fury. "Join us or never see him again," the whisper echoed around her, each syllable wrapping around her throat like a noose. Her hands trembled as she fought to stay steady, adrenaline flooding her system. Every instinct told her to flee, yet the thought of losing Liam sent a jolt of rage through her. "You won't take him." It came out as a growl. Rebecca lunged forward, a surge of defiance pushing her through the cluster of figures. She could hear them howling with glee, their voices melding into one another in a cacophony of terror. She stumbled through the trees, heart racing, desperately searching for the glimmer of hope that was Liam. "Mom!" His voice split the night, laced with imminent dread. "Mom, please." I'm scared. As if guided by fate, she spotted an old playset basking in a sliver of moonlight near the edge of the yard. The slide curved like a serpent, and the swings creaked, abandoned yet eerily inviting. "Liam!" She screamed, urgency clawing at her throat. She dashed toward it, breathing heavily, each step becoming a challenge as the laughter grew louder, as if the shadows were closing in on her. In that moment, she saw him, a small figure huddled beneath the swings, tears streaming down his face. But his eyes were wide with terror, staring not at her but past her, and then she felt it, a chill, a creeping weight wrapping around her body like a shroud. The shadows swelled, encircling her, feeding off her fear. She turned, dread pooling in her gut as she faced the encroaching darkness. "Liam, run!" she yelled, fear pushing her voice to its limits. But the moment hung heavy in the air. The laughter ceased, swallowed by silence, leaving only the sound of her own frantic breaths. And then, a whisper floated through the void, chilling her to the bone. "Join us forever or lose your son to the darkness." The shadows began to merge, their forms morphing into something altogether monstrous. It was clear, she didn't just have to find Liam, she had to save him from the darkness, whatever that meant. With resolve hardening in her heart, Rebecca took a deep breath, the weight of despair mingling with a flicker of hope. She would do whatever it took to pull Liam from this nightmare. But as the darkness enveloped her once more, she feared she might not have the strength to escape. What did that darkness want from them? And was she strong enough to face what lay beyond? The air thickened around Rebecca, forming a suffocating blanket that clung to her skin. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she fought against the pull of the shadows. They writhed and twisted, their outlines sharp and jagged, eager to devour her will. "Liam!" she cried again, her voice breaking, desperation seeping into every syllable. He was mere feet away, but the darkness loomed vast and insurmountable, a gaping maw filled with unseen horrors ready to swallow them whole. Just as despair threatened to overtake her, she saw it, a flicker of movement beneath the swings. Liam! She could see his figure, small and fragile. She reached instinctively towards him, her fingers stretching to grasp what felt like the essence of hope. "Mom!" he whimpered, his voice barely a whisper against the subdued atmosphere. As she closed the distance, the corners of her vision warped, filled with dark shapes pulsating with malicious intent. The laughter returned, a cacophony of sinister voices that echoed in her mind, mingling with every terrified thought. "Just take him and join us." They sang in a twisted harmony, urging her toward a darkness beneath the surface of her consciousness. She dug in her heels, forcing herself to remain grounded. "No. I want to let you take him." It wasn't just a plea, it was a vow, etched in the core of her being. The air sparked as she stretched out her hand, a tether of love binding her to Liam. He reached back toward her, and she saw the flicker of determination igniting in his own frightened eyes. In that instant, a twisted figure lunged from the shadows, a monster with too many limbs and a wide, jagged smile that stretched far beyond the grotesque limits of human features. Its eyes glowed with malicious glee, gorging on her fear. She barely had time to scream before it lunged. Instinct took over. Rebecca threw herself in front of Liam, summoning every ounce of strength she had. "Stay behind me," she ordered, voice trembling but fierce. She felt the swift rush of wind as the creature approached, its intent clear, consumed them both. But Rebecca stood her ground, rooted by love, turning her fear into a blinding shield, one she hoped could stave off the nightmarish reality closing in around them. The laughter swelled into a deafening roar, echoing through the darkened yard. The figures twisted and contorted, reaching towards her as if they were part of the night itself. But with claws of resolve, she willed the darkness back, envisioning a light breaking through the oppressive gloom. "Leave us alone!" she shouted, a surge of power filling her voice. The shadows hesitated, momentarily recoiling from her fierce declaration, but that brief reprieve was just a flicker. The laughter returned, morphing into a deep growl that resonated through her bones. "You think you can resist us?" The voice dripped with mockery. "Your strength is a fleeting illusion." "No!" she screamed, a primal yell echoing into the abyss. Suddenly, she felt a warm hand slip into her own Liam's. The contact jolted through her, booting her heart with desperate energy. His warmth surged through their connection, strengthening her resolve as their hands fused together, mother and child, united against the encroaching dark. The shadows reformed, their shapes shifting ominously. "You think love will save you?" they hissed, the voice coiling like smoke in the air, deceitful and haunting. "You will soon find that love has its price." Rebecca's blood ran cold. What did that even mean? The terror of uncertainty gnawed at her insides. She glanced at Liam, his small face marred with fear but lit with a flicker of hope. Her heart ached with a fierce protective instinct. The shadows surged forward again, and she pulled Liam closer as they stepped back. "We can't give up," she said, voice steady against the tide of darkness. "We're stronger together." As they backed away, the figures closed in, laughter morphing into a hunger that sent ice through her veins. Just as the encroaching darkness seemed ready to overtake them both, she spotted an old lantern hanging from a nearby tree, swaying gently, as if beckoning them. "Liam, follow me," she shouted, unaware of what awaited them but knowing there was no time to ponder. Would the lantern guide them to safety or deeper into the shadows? She had to find out, but fear clawed at her heels as they hurtled toward the unknown, leaving behind the cacophony of mockery trailing into the night. But what would they find at the end of this grotesque journey? Would hope create a path, or was it all just another trap? The lantern's feeble light flickered as they ran, casting shadows that danced menacingly on the ground. Rebecca reached out, grasping at the cool metal, her fingers trembling with a mix of dread and hope. Each step felt like a race against impending doom. They had to keep moving. "Mom, what is that thing?" Liam's voice quivered, pulling her from the brink of that paralyzing panic. She could see his pale, frightened face illuminated by the lantern's glow, and it fueled her desperation. "I don't know," she whispered, forcing a brave smile, but her heart throbbed painfully knowing there was no clarity in this darkness. The laughter echoed all around them, a sinister serenade pressing against her sanity. They dashed across the shadowy yard, the laughter morphing into a symphony of discordant voices, weaving together a tale of despair. "They're close. They want us." It felt as if the very ground beneath them polluted the air with malice. The shadows pressed in, creeping closer, their grotesque forms swirling and shifting like smoke. Every now and then, one would stretch out like a claw, snagging at their heels but never quite reaching them. It was taunting, keeping them just at the edge of terror. "Faster, Liam," she urged, pulling him along. They stumbled onto the porch, breathless and trembling. The boards creaked beneath their weight, a cacophony of sound punctuated by Liam's sobs. "Mom, the door!" he cried, pointing as the lantern's light flickered unpredictably, revealing the dark threshold looming before them. The door stood ajar, a gaping mouth leading into opaque darkness. It felt like an invitation and a threat all at once. "Do we go inside?" Liam's eyes shone with fear, mixing with an innocent hope that perhaps safety lay within. "Only if we keep moving," Rebecca said, her voice suddenly firmer. She didn't know what lurked beyond, but she couldn't let Liam sense her doubt. Grabbing the lantern tighter, she pushed him forward, her mind racing. They stepped over the threshold. Instantly, the temperature dropped, a chill wrapping itself around them like vultures circling prey. The light barely held against the enveloping dark, flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. Inside, the air was thick with an oppressive silence, almost too heavy to breathe. Shadows loomed larger here, crawling across the walls like living entities, whispering secrets that twisted around Rebecca's mind. "You shouldn't have come," they hissed, each voice dripping with age-old malice. Mom Liam's voice trembled beside her, casting a weary glance at the flickering lantern. "What is happening? We just need to find a way out of here." She scanned their surroundings, desperate for anything that felt safe. They stumbled down a narrow corridor, lined with warped portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them, judging, waiting. Each step felt like a betrayal to the people who once walked here, their smiles now twisted by the shadows lurking just beyond the frame. "Don't look at them, Liam. Focus on me," she urged, feeling her pulse quicken. An unsettling feeling knotted in her stomach, warning her against lingering too long. Suddenly, from the depths of the dark, a low growl resonated through the air, pulling everything into a frigid silence. She froze, the shadows around them swelling with anticipation. Mom Liam pulled at her sleeve, his grip tightening. What was that? Before she could answer, a figure emerged from the darkness, a childlike silhouette, pale and gaunt, its eyes glimmering with an otherworldly glow. It stood still, head tilted, as if sizing them up. A stifling silence enveloped them, stretching into eternity. Rebecca's heart thumped loudly in her chest, drowning out all sound. "Please help me," the figure whispered, its voice a chilling echo that slithered into her consciousness. "Stay back." Rebecca instinctively pushed Liam behind her, instincts flaring. The weight of the shadowed figure pressed against her resolve, drawing her toward it. "What do you want?" she demanded, a mixture of defiance and fear mingling in her voice. The figure took a step forward, pale fingers twitching, stretching toward the lantern. "Help us, join us." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Something in its gaze spoke of a deep, unsettling need, but mingled with that was a warning, an invasion of every fear she held dear. A violent shudder ripped through the walls, reminder of the horrors they had fled. "Run, Liam!" she shouted, yanking him back, nearly falling as the ground trembled beneath them. The laughter returned, louder and more frantic, drowning out her command as the shadows swelled, eager to engulf them. They turned, desperately searching for an escape as the weight of those hollow eyes bore down on them, pressing them toward the unknown. But what horror awaited at the end of this journey? Would they truly escape, or had they stumbled straight into the heart of darkness? The air hung thick, heavy with an electric fear that made Rebecca's skin crawl. Each breath felt labored, as if the house itself was sucking the life from her. She tightened her grip on Liam's hand, dragging him along as the echo of their footsteps harmonized with the relentless laughter that writhed in the darkness around them. "Where do we go?" Liam whimpered, barely audible over the chaos that surrounded them. Rebecca scanned desperately for a door, a window, anything that promised freedom. "We just have to keep moving." Her own voice sounded foreign, splintered from terror. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, walls lined with blackened wood that closed in around them, shadows coiling and twisting. Watching as they stumbled deeper into the darkness, Rebecca felt the temperature drop further. The hairs on her arms stood erect, an eerie chill wrapping around her like an icy hand. They reached a small parlor, the faint outline of furniture emerging from the shadows. Polished surfaces reflected their lantern-esque glow, mocking their meager source of light. The laughter faded, replaced by a low whisper that seemed to seep through the very walls. "You shouldn't have come here. You'll never leave, Mom." Liam's face was pale, terror etched across his features. "Make it stop." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to shake off the creeping despair. "We can do this. We have to find a way out." But as she opened her eyes, the whispers grew louder, insistent, a cacophony that felt like a deafening scream layered in silence. Suddenly, dread washed over her as she noticed something odd. The portraits here were not just warped, they were alive. Faces twisted in agony, mouths opening and closing silently, their eyes pleading and tormented. The figures hung in a dance of despair, trapped in a moment of horror for eternity. "Look away, Liam," she shouted, tugging him toward the far side of the room, desperate to shield him from the sights that threatened to consume them. In a corner, half hidden in darkness, a doorway emerged. A bare wood door, its surface marked with scratches and dents as if something had scraped against it repeatedly, yearning for release. "Mom, what if it's a trap?" Liam's voice quivered, his brow furrowing in fear. Rebecca hesitated. "It's better than staying here." With determination, she pushed the door open. It creaked, a low groan that sent shivers down her spine. They stepped inside a narrow stairwell, the air damp and cloying. The lantern flickered, casting jittery light on the crumbling steps leading downward. "Where does this lead?" Liam asked, his small voice trembling. "To safety," she lied, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were moving deeper into a trap rather than away from danger. They descended slowly, the darkness thickening around them. Below, Rebecca could hear a low humming, rhythmic and relentless, like a heartbeat reverberating through the very bones of the earth. It sent an unmistakable jolt of fear through her. "Do you hear that?" she whispered urgently. "Yes." Liam trembled, pressing closer to her, his little body a fragile shield against the evil swelling around them. The humming grew louder as they reached the bottom, revealing an expansive chamber drenched in shadows. An altar stood in the center, draped in tattered fabric that fluttered as if caught in an unseen breeze. An offering table? Instinctively, Rebecca knew it was a place of dark rituals. Faded symbols crawled along the walls, swirling in patterns that gave life to the deepest of nightmares. "Mom, I think we should go back," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Rebecca could respond, the temperature dropped even further, and the shadows towards the altar writhed as if alive, twisting and coiling toward them. Then came a voice, low and guttural. "Welcome. Join us." Rebecca's heart raced. Panic surged through her veins. She pulled Liam close, and without thinking, they turned and bolted back toward the stairs, but the moment they turned, the door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing ominously through the chamber. The shadows surged forward, eager to claim them. "Run! Don't look back!" As they ran, the walls pulsed with the strange hum, a throbbing energy that seemed to resonate within her chest. The darkness chased them, hungry and relentless. But where would they go? Would the walls let them escape? All that echoed in her mind was the chilling thought, they weren't alone here. Something darker was waiting, watching. The very shadows themselves seemed sentient, closing in, ready to pounce. As they reached the staircase, the lantern flickered violently, casting one last pitiful glow across the chamber. In that moment, shadows surged forth, clutching at their heels, whispering a promise, a terrible invitation. Join us, what awaited them in the dark. Would they succumb, or was there a way to break free from this horrifying trap? Their feet pounded against the old stones, desperation fueling their speed. Rebecca's heart raced, a staccato beat that drowned out the sinister whispers echoing through the chamber. "Faster, Liam," she urged, her voice breaking as she strained against the suffocating darkness. The shadows seemed to close in like a living fog, curling around them, blotting out the flickering light. Each step sank deeper into a freezing fear that clawed at her throat. She forced herself to focus on the hand gripped tightly in hers, the warmth of Liam grounding her in this hellish place. Panic clawed at the edges of her resolve. They reached the staircase, but it felt like a mirage. Each step they took downward warped into an impossible descent. The further they went, the louder the hum became, a grotesque melody seeping into their minds. It promised comfort, but beneath that tainted lullaby lay insidious whispers that made her stomach churn. "Mom, I can't. I can't breathe," Liam gasped, his voice small and trembling. "Just hold on, baby. We're going to find a way out." But even as she spoke, doubt curled around her heart like a snake, squeezing the breath from her lungs. The walls around them pulsed rhythmically, the heartbeat of the house thrumming in perfect sync with their mounting dread. Just as the echoes of the charnel laughter faded, a jagged cackle pierced the silence. It ricocheted off the walls, echoing the very shadows themselves, mingling with the whispers. "You think you can escape? You belong to us now, no?" she screamed, grinding her teeth as they reached the end of the stairs. The glowing lantern sputtered ominously as she shoved aside the door that loomed before them. It opened onto a darkened hall, elongated and endless, a tunnel forged in terror. Liam stumbled, briefly losing his grip. She turned back just in time to catch him, pulling him back to her side. But the shadows leaped forward, greedy fingers scraping across the stone floor, ravenous for their warmth. "Run!" she yelled, pulling him once more through the threshold. They dashed down the hall, breathless and frantic, hearts hammering. The air thickened with dread, and the atmosphere crackled, charged with a malevolent energy. And then she saw them, figures in the dimness, their forms morphing before her eyes. Souls trapped in agony, their faces twisted in horror as they reached out, desperate for release. "Don't look at them!" Rebecca shouted, shielding Liam's eyes with her hands. They surged past the phantoms, numb from fear yet driven by the instinct to survive. Behind them, the shadows howled, a chorus of despair that reverberated through the halls with a bone-chilling clarity. The path slanted downward again, revealing a series of doors lining the walls, each one a dark mouth promising terror. "Mom, what if one of those is a way out?" Liam whimpered, his voice thick with terror. "They're all tricks, Liam," she hissed, choosing to press onward, ignoring the flickers of hope that sent shivers down her spine, but an explosion of laughter erupted then, filling the air with malice. Those haunting echoes shifted into a deep rumble. "You'll never escape. You will join us." It rattled her bones. She could feel the weight of despair anymore. It was tangible, a presence that squeezed around her heart, just as dread threatened to engulf them. The corridor opened into a larger chamber. The walls glistened with an oily sheen, and the hum grew deafening. An altar stood at the far end, an invitation coded in malevolence. "Mom, it's the same altar." Liam's eyes widened with fear. She scanned the area, desperation palpable as she desperately searched for an exit. The shadows pressed forward, shadows writhing and cursing furiously as they clawed at her ankles. "We want to let you leave," they taunted, their chorus rising and falling like a sickening chant. "Liam, come on." She pulled him, retreating instinctively. But as they turned to run back the way they came, the entrance they had just passed through slammed shut with resounding finality. No escape. They were trapped. Terror twisted her gut as the ground began to tremble beneath them, and the altar crackled with energy, glowing with an unholy light before erupting into a vortex of shadows. "Stay close, Liam. Whatever happens, don't let go," she yelled, the sense of doomed inevitability creeping in like a thick fog in that moment. As the shadows bowed from the altar, a figure emerged, silhouetted against the light, an echo of all the souls trapped within. It grinned, a wicked gash that seemed to split its face in half. "Join us or perish." It beckoned, a hypnotic promise of acceptance hanging in the air. Rebecca's breath caught, fear twisting her insides. Which fate was worse? Would they succumb to the darkness or find a way to fight back against the lure of despair? The answer seemed to hover just out of reach. Rebecca's heart raced, pounding in syncopated rhythms with her terror as the altar glowed ominously. The figure, a grotesque amalgamation of souls lost to the night, smiled, its jagged grin a harbinger of despair. "Join us or perish," it cried, a sinister timbre echoing through the chamber. "Liam," she shouted, pulling him tight against her, as if her embrace could shield him from the encroaching darkness. She scanned the swirling shadows for a way out, desperate and unyielding amidst the chaos. The atmosphere buzzed with a malevolent energy, thumping against her skin like a living thing. "Mom, what do we do?" Liam's voice quaked, and she could see the fear etched across his small face. "Trust me, we fight back," Rebecca said, channeling every ounce of maternal instinct into her resolve. She felt the darkness closing in around them, clawing at her ankles, but the warmth of Liam's hand ignited a flicker of determination. "We have to be stronger than this." With renewed vigor, she raised the lantern, its faltering light flickering against the darkness. "You'll never take us," she shouted, her voice rising above the din, fueling her courage. Each phalanx of shadows drew back slightly, as though her defiance struck a chord within them. "Your strength is just an illusion." The figure on the altar jeered, gesturing with mocking grace. "You think mere light can save you? Darkness is infinite. You're trapped in a maze of your own making." Rebecca felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. The shadows pulsed, resonating with laughter that felt like tendrils wrapping around her throat, squeezing. She pulled Liam closer, feeling his warmth and fear merge with her resolve. "We want to be part of your twisted game," she declared, holding the lantern high, its light growing stronger under the weight of her conviction. "Remember the stories, Liam," she whispered, urgency lacing her voice. "The light will always break through the darkness." Suddenly, she had an idea. "Focus on love, our love." She closed her eyes, pulling memories of joyful moments, Liam's first steps, laughter shared over breakfast, holding each other tight during storms. Magic lingered in their bond, a force that could shatter even the darkest shadows. As the darkness surged, she felt it, a flickering warmth blooming within, radiating from their intertwined hands. Join us, the shadows hissed, but Rebecca and Liam stood firm, the lantern illuminating a protective dome that reached out like tendrils of light. "Believe in the light," she screamed. "Believe in each other." With a sudden burst of brightness, the chamber erupted in white-hot light, the shadows recoiling, howling in pain as they were banished from the luminous sphere. "No. This can't be." The figure screeched, disintegrating before their eyes, the trapped souls screaming in a cacophony of souls desperately seeking freedom. "Mom! Look!" Liam pointed, a mix of awe and relief flooding his features as the oppressive weight lifted from the air. Slowly, the altar cracked open, revealing a door shimmering with an inviting light. "This way." Without hesitation, they charged through, the warm glow washing over them, illuminating the path ahead. As they burst into the brightness, the shadows faded into nothingness, their laughter quieted to whispers, echoing into the void behind them. "Keep running, Liam," Rebecca yelled, adrenaline surging. With every step, shadows ebbed like tide pools receding into the distance. The doorway led them outdoors, the cool air of night enveloping them, carrying the sense of fresh grass and freedom. Sunlight began to creep across the horizon, painting the world free of darkness. In that moment, Rebecca's heart soared. They were safe together. Rebecca knelt down, encompassing Liam in her arms, his small head tucking perfectly against her shoulder. They both breathed heavy, his unsteady breath matching the frantic cadence of her heart. "We did it," she whispered, tears of relief welling in her eyes, a profound weight lifted as a new dawn broke, a promise of hope after horror. Never again would they allow the darkness to take root in their hearts. Together, they stare into the shadows and challenge them. "I love you, kiddo," she murmured, pressing a kiss against his forehead. A feeling of warmth enveloped them, igniting a brighter dawn that illuminated the remnants of their ordeal. They stood united, a mother and son unyielding against the dark. As they walked towards the light, a thought tugged at Rebecca's heart: the shadows would always linger at the edges of life's darkness. But they would always have each other. Together, they were stronger. And for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. If you loved this story, now is your moment to act. You need to subscribe immediately so you don't miss our next exclusive tales. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. I want to see you flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about this ending. And please, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.